Hello and welcome to the Deb Calvert channel on Bright Talk. I'm really happy that you're able to join me today. And if you are attending live, please feel free to ask your questions. Post those questions because people who come in later on demand will probably have similar questions and they'll be glad that you ask them. I'll take the questions all through the presentation. I'll do my best to weave them in where they fit naturally, and any that I don't get to, I'll try to circle back to at the very end. If I miss them entirely, I promise I'll follow up with you via email and we'll have a conversation that way. Today we're talking about leading change, and this is part of the series for HR managers and managers in other functions who are looking to be more effective, primarily through the soft skills and some of the intangibles. I know there's a lot of interest in this topic because I had several requests for it and because the pre-registration was pretty surprising. Lots of people wanted this particular topic. And our objective here today is just to get an overview of some of the abilities and skills and competencies that you need to be effective as a change leader. But I'm also, as always, going to give you some very tactical, practical tools and strategies that you can use. So with that said, let's jump in. If you are new to Bright Talk, a couple things I want you to know. First of all, I always load up the presentations with attachments and links so that you can go in and get some additional learning. I'll mention those where they make sense through the presentation, but feel free to take any of those and use them. The first one is probably the one I should mention now. A PDF of these slides is available there. I know some of you like to print those out and take notes as I go. So jump in there to the attachments, find that PDF and download it if you want to right away. Otherwise, you can use that to refer back to later. I'm Deb, and I've worked in HR, I've worked in sales, I've worked in operations, and I used to work for a Fortune 500 as an HR director. I've been in business for myself with People First Productivity Solutions for almost 14 years, and all of those years I've continued to work with HR leaders and with executives as a coach. So I'll try to take your questions, and if I don't have the answers, I'll find someone for you who does. I hope this won't be the only place that we connect. I would love to connect with you over on LinkedIn, so please find me there. I've also put a link in the attachments to make it easy. Okay, so here we go. Change management. The first thing to know if you're going to be a change leader is this. It's one of the most important things to know, and yet it's so often forgotten. It's impossible to do the same thing that you've always done at the same time that you're trying to do something different. You have to plan for and communicate about the end of the old way as well as the start of the new way. If you allow those two things to coexist, any change that you hope to introduce is going to take a long time to materialize. People are reluctant to change, and if you give them an option, they're going to stick with what's comfortable and familiar. So this very first quote here, this is the essence of change leadership. That first of all, you have to come to a stop. You have to draw a line between what used to be and get people focused on what now is. Well, as I said, right, change it's big. It's scary, it's overwhelming, it's intimidating. In general, people view change as something that's negative. Even the very most positive changes that people ever experience, getting married, getting a new house, getting a promotion, having children, all of those positive changes still make the list of the things that are most stressful to adults. Change is hard. There's a phrase, a word called homeostasis. It means a state in which a person's relationship to the environment is stable. See, we all strive for that. We all want homeostasis. We want things around us to be predictable. We want to know what to expect, and we want to know how we fit in our environment. So for that very reason, it is actually human nature. It's hardwired in us to resist change. What I'm showing you now, these are 8 things that represent types of changes in an organization. And I'll just pause here for a moment and give you a chance to reflect. How many of these particular types of changes have you experienced in your organization in the past year? Go ahead and type it into me. You can use the box where you would post questions. I'm just curious, out of the 8, for those of you who are attending live, give me a number. How many out of these 8 have you and your organization experienced in the past year? You're going to post a number for me. Out of 8, how many? Yeah, that's what I would expect. For everybody who's posted so far, it is 8 out of 8. Every single one of these changes, because change is all around us, and it's around us all the time. Change is unavoidable. No matter how much we'd like to escape it, no matter how much we'd like to preserve the status quo, no matter how uncomfortable it is, the truth is that change in these 8 ways is happening all the time. So it's unanimous. Out of everybody who cast a vote here, oh, there's one. We've got a couple now who just came in who aren't 8, but we were nearly unanimous. And yes, certainly quite a few of them. Nobody's posting 0 or 1. Changes everywhere. So what are we going to do with it, right? You know this already, that change is everywhere and that it's hard to deal with. So what are we going to do about it? Well, what we're going to do here is, first of all, understand what's going on as people experience change. That way you can empathize with them and you can help them to come along with the change in a way that's less defensive or resistant. And I'm going to give you some tools for doing that, including a template for your change message. But we'll talk about why this resistance happens, and hopefully you can see it in a way that isn't negative. Because the first thing that I would tell you is this. If you're someone who's introducing change, typically what's happened is that behind the scenes, you were aware at some point in the past that a change was needed. And then you were in meetings, and in those meetings, people discussed the options for making a change. And then probably you went through some budgeting exercise and you allocated resources around this change, and you developed a timeline for the change. And in all of that time, you yourself had ample opportunity to get used to the change, to the idea of it. And then you go and you announce it to other team members, and they haven't had that time. Somehow we expect them to adopt the change right away, to get on board with it, without that same advantage that we had of all the time to get used to the idea. And they just can't do it. They're human. They have homeostasis. They want that status of stability in their environment. So we might have a little bit of an unreasonable expectation, because this is what has to happen for anybody as they're responding to change. See, first we perceive that a change is happening. Then we have a response that's initially emotional, followed by a reaction that's typically protective. And all of that happens the moment that you announce a change, or the moment that you begin to hint at that change and perceptions start to bubble up. You have months and months perhaps to go through it, and they've only had a little while to experience all of these responses that you have already been through. Of course, out of the 3, perceptions, emotions, and reactions, out of the 3, the only one that we can see happening is the outward reaction. Perceptions and emotions are often hidden, not always, but often they are. And we might forget that that's what's happening internally if all we are noticing is the outward reaction. So we want to be sure that we are acknowledging that people have feelings. We want to help them with their perceptions because, well, you know what happens if we only give a little bit of information. Nature abhors a vacuum, so people start to fill in the blanks and they make stuff up, and it might get exaggerated. Fears begin to fester. So we want to be sure that we're providing messaging that helps with the perceptions, that potentially helps to manage the emotions, or at least dignifies the emotions, so that when the reactions occur, we're not only responding to those. Now, we said it bears repeating, change is difficult. But think about what you're asking people to do. You're not simply asking them to modify a process. You're not simply asking them to take on a new task. In many cases, when you introduce change, you are, in essence, asking someone to assume a new identity because they have feelings about their work, feelings like, wait a minute, I'm really good at what I do. I like the way I do my work. Now you're telling me it's not good enough? I have to change something? That I'm not good enough? That's what's happening in the back of people's minds. It is something that you're asking them to change that's personal to them. But if you can change your approach and the way that you do business, well, that's huge. But not everybody can immediately do that, especially if they have identity tied up in the work that they do. So we have to help them end something in their way that they used to do things before they can start to do things in a new way. And they won't choose an ending if given an option, and they won't end easily unless you help them to see the benefits and to be a part of that change going forward. Okay, so change is difficult. We have to deal with all these things. Here's something else we have to deal with. No way around it. We have to understand, as a change leader, we have to be able to recognize what others may be feeling when there's that expectation of change. There is a process. It's a 3-phase process. I said already, we're going to have an ending. And anytime we have an ending, it represents a sense of loss. And with loss, we have some initial shock. We might be fearful of the unknown. We might end up blaming other people and putting those negative emotions out there somewhere else. And we might be anxious about, what does this mean? And what does it say about me? And will I be able to do something differently? And will I like doing it differently? Right? All of these things immediately get triggered when an ending is imminent. Now, over time, and we'd like it to be instantaneous, but it's not. Over time, people begin to transition into a new way of doing things. Oftentimes, they're slow to adapt, especially if you introduce a lot of change in your organization, and even more so if you introduce change, but it doesn't always stick, because then they wait around thinking, well, they're skeptical. Is this real? Is this the flavor of the day? Do they really mean it? If you have any of that going on in your organization, then you could expect all changes to then get slowed down because of that hesitancy that they've been conditioned to enact. But during this transition phase, some people are moving into the new way, some are hanging back with the old way or refusing to move. Some are right here in the middle. They're uncomfortable. They're not certain. They are waiting to see if it's serious, and they're confused. It doesn't feel good when you don't know and you haven't got the ability to show mastery like you used to show. Okay, and then eventually, hopefully sooner than later, we get people to adapt. They start to see the opportunities within the new beginning, and they become a little curious about it. Soon they develop some ownership of it. You might even get people who are early adopters and begin to help champion that change with you. And the more they do that, the more confident they get. Now, all of this takes time, and all of this is something that a change leader has to be aware of. Otherwise, you're going to try to accelerate too fast, and you're just going to end up inadvertently slowing things down because people are stuck. They can't keep up with you. To make sure that doesn't happen, we have to be smart about the way that we implement change. And we're going to answer all of these questions. I'd like you to think about all 6 of these things as you think about ways to implement change, even knowing that people are going to process change through those 3 phases, and the change isn't going to feel good, and you might even be asking them to let go of something that they hold near and dear. So we'll answer these 6 questions so that you can lead any actual change that you introduce. I thought it might be a good idea here to put a definition around change management. There are many of them out there. I really like this one. And the reason I like this one is because, well, just like you said, change is happening all the time. Most of you experienced 8 out of 8 different types of changes in just 1 year. So I think we have to acknowledge that it is a continuous process. The only thing that's a constant anymore is change. And it's a process of getting your organization, your team, aligned with the marketplace. That's the whole purpose of change, so that you can have a competitive advantage, so that you can utilize the newest tools and stay efficient and profitable, and so that you are able to keep your organization as healthy as possible. That's what change is about. I'm not sure everybody always sees it that way. We might not always do a good job of explaining why we're springing this change on our team. We should remember that people need to know the why. And when they know the why, it is easier for them to give up what they used to have and to get excited about what they will have or what they will do. By the way, if what we're talking about here, it really is both management and leadership. Manage meaning to handle, leading meaning to guide. And when you're in this role of being the implementer of change, there are lots of things to handle. And there certainly is this new place that you want to guide people to. So it is about managing the work and leading people. If you are new to this channel or haven't worked with me before, you might be interested to know that our signature program, Workplace Conversations, does both. And if you're looking for ways to do both in managing change and in all other kinds of supervisory and soft skills, Workplace Conversations is a course that you might like to check out. I believe I gave you a link to that in the attachments. So this is what we're after, and this is what it means to you. As the person who's going to implement change, these are the characteristics, the traits, that are evident in the most effective change managers. I'll give you just a moment here to do a little self-assessment. 5 items. Think about which ones you're already strong in and which ones you might need to hone your skills in so that you can be more effective as a change manager. Each one is important in its own right. Some of them fit together, but we don't always remember the steps. They go together in this way. If you're not afraid to act, that bodes well for you because you are more likely then to be willing to move the organization out of its comfort zone. But just because you're not afraid to act doesn't automatically mean that you're going to be sensitive to how others view change. So you're looking to put all 5 of these together to be as effective as you possibly can be. Make a note to yourself, which one of these do you need to work on? Okay, let me give you some additional guidelines for change. Those are just in the background, the traits that you need. When you introduce a change, here are 7 things to think about and do to accelerate the change, to dignify individuals, and to help make it easier for them to make passages between endings, transitions, and beginnings. The first one is what I just said. They need to know why. Otherwise, it seems arbitrary, and it might even seem like you're doing something to them. So we've got to explain why. What's the rationale? What's the benefit to the business? What's the personal benefit to the individuals who are affected by that change. Have a good reason for changing and articulate it. You might have to say it many times, and if so, that's okay. You're helping people every time you talk about the why. You're helping them to see the reason and to get a little extra measure of commitment to making that change. The second item is equally important. As much as you can, involve people in the change, especially the people affected by the change. Try not to spring it on them, because what will happen then is you'll have more resistance, because they won't feel dignified. They won't feel like you took time to pay attention to what they might contribute to the change, or you didn't notice how much that change was going to affect them, or you didn't care. You didn't take time to empathize with what they were going to be experiencing. The more you involve people at the front end in the planning and in the implementation of the change, the more you involve them, the more buy-in you'll have. And it's really important to get buy-in before you ask them to buy your ideas or to buy what you're trying to sell them as the benefits. Get that buy-in early on. When you do, you'll have another advantage. Because they were involved, because part of the change was their own idea or they had some input, what that means is that you'll have some change champions. You'll have people who are influential in the organization and others who can help guide their peers into this change. That makes it easier for everybody because it's not just coming top down. Of course, when you make a change and you've explained why and you've involved people, you're also going to support that change. You're going to equip people so they can make the change. If they need skills, you're going to give them time to learn those skills. If they need different resources and equipment, you're going to provide easy access to that. You're going to reinforce the change. It's not going to be something that happens over here on the sidelines. You're going to integrate it into your work and think about the whole system and how other pieces can reinforce that change and not work against it. So you're going to think very holistically about your change. If necessary, it's a good idea to enlist outside help. There are a couple of reasons for that. First of all, whenever you've got something that's dramatically new and dramatically different, chances are that you don't have expertise, and neither do the people who are being asked to quickly master whatever it is you've offered them. Having outside help that has that superior level of skills or knowledge, well, that gives you a resource. It also gives people an extra measure of confidence and a go-to that they can rely on. That outside help probably is going to have a price tag to it, but the amount of money you save by accelerating the change and by not failing or not having a false start with your change, it will almost certainly give you the ROI that you're looking for. As people are changing, put up some symbols, put up some reminders. Celebrate and reward and acknowledge the times when people have tried something new and they're doing something well. Do this publicly so that others can replicate what's been successful. And don't forget, with any change, people have struggled and they've made sacrifices and they've forced themselves to keep a positive attitude and to move beyond their sadness at the sense of loss. And they tried things and they weren't very good at them, but then they tried them again and they learned and they got there. And it was hard. The place where they need a little bit of acknowledgement and encouragement isn't just at the end. It's along the way. And you can accelerate change by helping people feel good about small wins and the incremental steps that they take toward that change. Okay, so as a change manager, these are 7 things that you'll want to be sure to do during the change time. Let's talk now about some additional practical, tactical things that you can do to prepare for change. You're going to prepare yourself and the people who depend on you and the people who are going to be affected by the change as well as the organization, the folks who are on the periphery but might also be impacted by this change. You have to think about it from all those angles. Otherwise, you're going to hit a roadblock. To prepare for change, it's a really good idea to acknowledge fear of change and resistance to change, and then address those fears and that resistance head on. Do that by involving others in change. Keep them informed, because what they imagine is way worse than what's actually going to be. So manage the message and make sure that they hear it from you, and don't make it up. Be sure and learn from mistakes that are made along the way. Don't let your change get lumped in with other changes that were introduced in the past, those other changes that were poorly executed and kind of make everybody gun shy about the next change. And then take that change step by step. If your team or organization is risk averse, if they're extremely resistant to change, go ahead and stage it so that you get there step by step. If you already know they aren't going to make wholesale change overnight, your plan has to be for incremental change to build toward it. And pretty soon, you'll get some momentum. And when you do, then you can ride that wave and introduce more change, bigger change. To get there, you have to have people feeling successful. You'll need to encourage them. Now, be really sure that you don't make change just for the sake of change. And don't ever let that be the perception. Right? Be prepared to justify and explain the reasons for every change that you make. People will appreciate that, and they really do need it. You're going to plan the steps of the change. You're going to plan for communicating about it and celebrating it. You're going to plan for specific things you can do to help with the endings, meaning there becomes a cutoff time when we no longer do things the old way. And you're going to build bridges to that change. You're not going to hide it. You're going to get feedback and collaborate with other people every single step of the way. To do this, here's what you need. As a change leader, here's what you need. I can't give this to you, but I can recommend to you that you find someone who can. Could be a colleague, could be your manager, could be a coach. It could be the team you bring around you to help you with this change. But you're going to anticipate resistance, and you're going to have your own emotions when things get really difficult. And you're going to need some stamina, and you'll want to remember to empathize with the feelings people are experiencing during change. And when people are resistant, you're going to need more stamina. And you'll have to keep going back to the well, so make sure you have a really good well. You're also going to need to give your team regular feedback throughout the change, throughout that whole process. Regular feedback about what they're doing well and what else you need to see. And you're going to be objective. You're not going to succumb to feelings of frustration because it's taking so long for them to adopt the change, and you're just tired of hearing about all those resistant feelings that they're having. You're going to try to remain objective and empathetic, and you're always going to keep the focus on the why. That's the vision. You're going to paint that picture of the future state. You're going to show people how their own interests can be realized by that future state and by making this change. And you're going to keep helping them move toward it little by little. That's the only way that change really happens. Now, I've mentioned resistance a few times. I guess we should talk about it directly. Here's what it sounds like. People say things like these. But, you know, if you look at these objectively, not all of these statements are overtly negative. So we don't want to hear them as resistance, because that won't really serve our purposes very well. Better for us to hear these statements as skepticism, or as fear of loss, or as a recollection of how change has occurred or not occurred in the past. So you would probably do well to think about how you might respond to statements like these. And if you've always been successful and people feel like change is not needed because of how successful you've been, well, that's a nice problem to have. But we have to remember that past success is the enemy of change. Success breeds complacency. So help people to see, even though you're successful now, this change is going to help you continue to be successful in the future. Keep it positive. Focus on those positive outcomes. Positive motivations and visions of what can be are always more motivating than fear of penalty in the present. So if you are going to try to motivate people for change, use the carrot instead of the stick. Speaking of responses, well, you're just going to go directly into it. You're going to identify resistance when you see it. You're not going to roll your eyes and ignore it. You're going to talk with that individual. You'll acknowledge their fear and their discomfort. You'll help them to see the benefits of changing. You'll let them know that you're in it together. You're going to work through it together, side by side through this change. And you're going to emphasize how much you value what they've done in the past, how much they're helping in the present to implement this change, and how much you're looking forward to what else they're going to be able to do in the future once this change has taken place. You're building commitment, you're collaborating, you're getting some consensus with people when you make it inclusive in this way. Okay, now I promised you that I would give you a tool. This is a 4-part formula for communicating clearly about change. Let me describe it to you, and I encourage you, if you can, as I'm talking, to make some notes. Think about a change that you're going to introduce. And jot down some notes. This is sort of a template, and you can script out each of these 4 parts to have a script for how you might introduce the change effectively. The first thing that you do is you describe the situation, and you describe it neutrally. You lay out the facts. Here's where we are. Here's where we want to be. Here's what's happening in the marketplace. Here are the competitive influences. Here's what stakeholders are saying, whatever it might be. You lay out the situation with as much transparency as possible. Right behind that, after you describe the situation, you acknowledge that people are going to have feelings about this. You would say, I know this may be unsettling for some of you. I know that we're going to have to spend some time learning about these new systems and that that's going to be difficult. You don't try to deny or mask any of those realities. You lay them out. You empathize and you let people know that you feel what they're feeling. And you also let them know that you've thought about and taken into account the impact or effects that this is going to have on them. If you skirt over that, if you ignore it or you don't talk about it, well, they assume you never even thought of it. They assume that it doesn't matter to you. And it's hard for them to believe that this change is possible the way you envision it because of all the things that you didn't take into account. So here in this 4-part formula, you're going to tell them you do know what it is, those circumstances and realities and part of the grand scheme. They're all the circumstances within which you still have to operate. So you're going to acknowledge those. You're going to proactively put them out there. Trust me, you're not going to plant any seeds of doubt for anyone. They would have come up with all of that and more on their own anyway. So better that it come from you. And finally, after you've described the situation and acknowledged the feelings and the impacts that this is going to have on people, then you say what you need. Here's what I need from you as we work our way through this change. I need you to try to maintain a positive attitude. And when the going gets tough, I need you to come and talk to me about it so we can work it out together. I need you to give this an honest try, because I know as much as you This is going to mean to you to make these changes, and it's going to be tough, but I need you to give it an honest try anyway. Whatever it is, you know your team. You're going to talk to them as individuals, and you're going to tell each one of them what you need from them. You describe the situation, talk about the feelings and the effects that you know it will have, and then you tell people what you need. That's how you communicate about change. I suggest, whenever possible, that you talk to people in person. And of course, I understand you might manage teams who are remote, but even if it can be video to video, something about the emotional piece of this and letting people know that you're there for them makes it better than trying to announce it in a memo or an email or even on a phone call. If you can, first meet with a group so everybody hears the same message. And very soon after that group meeting, meet with people one-on-one, because the feelings they're experiencing and the individual effects that it will have could be different one person to the next. Whatever you do, as you create that change message, be sure you're telling people the truth. As much as you possibly can, be transparent. Let them see all of the rationale, and let them see all of the steps that are going to happen. It's okay, as you're doing all of that, to also express your feelings. You might say, you know, I was a little apprehensive too. I've had 6 months already to get used to this idea, but I get it. I know how you're feeling. And here's some of the things that I realized along the way. Perfectly fine to share your feelings. And then lead the way. Take the first steps. It's not for everybody else to do. It's for you to also do. So show people that you're stepping out of your comfort zone too, and that you're doing the things necessary to enact change. And then encourage the others who start to take those first steps as well. Encourage them publicly so other people see the positive reaction that you're having, and they'll be more likely to replicate that step that they saw taken. Now, a few reminders. I've said, I think, everything here, but a few reminders. As you're making this change, it's not going to happen immediately. It probably won't be as smooth as you would like it to be. That makes it perfectly normal and natural. Don't give up, but do allow ample time for adjustment, not too much time, but certainly not an expectation of immediate change. As people are trying new things, anticipate that they are going to make mistakes. They have new things that they have to learn. They are going to be tugged back into the way they used to do things. And you'll help them along step by step. You're going to give a little grace and a little space. You're not going to abandon the change, but you're going to yield where you see people are struggling, and you're going to help them. You're going to motivate them by pushing the right buttons, by helping them to see the advantages of making the change on an individual basis. You're going to keep focused on that vision, the outcome, the positives that come out of this change. You're going to ask people how it's going. You're going to ask them what it is that's working. And you're going to act on all that feedback, positive and negative. And no matter what, you're going to continue to be an example of the positivity and of the effort and of the willingness to take some risks and fail so that you can learn and keep growing to make this change happen. Now, even when people fully, intellectually embrace the need to change, they're still going to have a tendency to stay in their comfort zone. Homeostasis is powerful. So you might have to create some negative disincentives for sticking with the way things used to be. You might have to have a penalty, or you might have to make it really difficult to do things the old way. Don't do that immediately, but at the point where you need there to be a clean, clear break with the past, make it uncomfortable or unpleasant to do things the old way. And let people know about what that timeline is. These two things are going to coexist for 1 month. On week 5, the old way is going to be XYZ more difficult, and by week 6, it's going to be gone. That's our timeline for this transition. I'm here to help let's make it work. I need you to give it an honest try. You're going to help move people along. You're not going to let them stay stuck in the past. All right, so that's your change strategy. Those are the tools that you can use. If we recap, let me just give you the basics. You're going to use our communication, the message about change. You're going to be very clear in what you need. You're going to be sensitive to the fact that people are experiencing a sense of loss and that there are emotions involved. You're going to prepare yourself and other people and the organization for change. You'll be looking to enlist change champions and to involve people who are affected by the change as much as you possibly can. And you're going to stay close to the change effort. You're not going to go away and expect people to do it on their own because that's just not realistic. And that makes you a change leader. If you do those things, your change efforts are going to be more successful than if you opt out of any of those. Don't let your discomfort about change cause you to try to take shortcuts, because that's what will ultimately cause your change to not be fully implemented. Okay, that's what I've got to say about change. There is an infographic. I broke it down into several pieces. It includes much of what we talked about, plus some other things, some other models for change, if you like that sort of a job aid. I invite your questions. We have just a couple minutes left here, and I'll take your questions live, the ones that I haven't already answered. You're welcome to email me if you have some questions that you want to talk about one-to-one. And please connect with me on LinkedIn or go over to the website, because our blogs and our tools that we put out through our community, it's the Connect community. If you sign up for that, you're going to get tools and information just like this every week. It's all free. We just like to put good stuff out there. If you could please just post a little review for me for this presentation. Let me know what you liked. Let me know what you'd like to see different next time. And thank you again for joining me.